Hey, Steve here, and in this video I'm sharing with you 3 interesting things that you can do with the curves adjustment in Photoshop. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and remember to subscribe to my channel so that you can be notified by YouTube every time I publish new videos like this. So we're just going to jump straight in with the first interesting thing that I wanted to share. Maybe you've seen it, maybe you haven't, but let's just run through anyway really quick. So I'll add a curves adjustment to this image and we can see the curves properties panel has opened up here. And as you probably already know, you can click to add a point on the curve and manipulate it up and down to brighten and darken the image. Or you can add multiple points by just clicking multiple times and then manipulating the curve that way. For example, here we've got a typical S curve for some contrast. But actually I didn't need to do that. I could have just pressed the reset button. But anyway, the first interesting thing that I wanted to show you was what you can do with this little toggle turned on here. So this little icon that when you hover over it says click and drag in image to modify the curve. Well, it lets you do exactly that. So I've toggled it on and just keep an eye over here on the properties panel. When I move the mouse around within the image, this dot is going to dance along the line of the curve. And what that's showing us is where within the histogram or where on the curve my mouse is currently situated. So why this is useful, I mean there's a bunch of different useful applications of this, but in terms of making adjustments to the curves adjustment, what it allows you to do is actually just like click and drag directly in the image. So here I'm sort of hovering just over a little bit of the cloud up here in the top left, and that's kind of somewhere up there in the highlights of the image here in the histogram. I can just click here and then drag the mouse up, and we can see that's adding the point and then dragging it up in the curve for me. So I don't actually have to kind of just click and guess exactly what parts of the image are going to be affected when I click here in the curve and then push it up or down. So in this example, let's say I wanted to brighten the highlights but not the shadows. What I would then do is just click around here and find a dark part of the image and just drag the mouse down to leave those shadows basically alone. That's the first interesting thing that I wanted to show you. It actually gets better with the second interesting thing that I wanted to show, which is that you can actually do the same thing but in the color channels. So let me just reset this now, and let's go to the red color here in the drop down, the red channel. And just like before, this technique works really nicely for a shot like this, where there's a lot of pinks in the clouds because of just the way the clouds turned out at this particular sunrise. So let's click and drag somewhere in the highlights here and move the curve up. Now, just bear with me a moment because this looks a bit weird, and that's because I haven't added that second point over here in the grass to now click and then drag down to essentially remove that increase that I added with the first point. I can remove that here with that second point. And so what we should see now, if I just disable this layer and now re-enable it, that increase in the reds has now mostly been applied to the highlights and some of the midtones. The third and final interesting thing that I wanted to show you in this quick video was that you can actually add pretty much as many points as you need along this line of the curve. So here we've got just 2 points that have been added, one to increase the reds in the highlights and one to kind of not really remove but just pin the curve in place so that it's not affected down here by the movement that I've added up here. So if you want to get really accurate with this, then what you can do is just add like a whole series of dots or a whole series of points along the curve here to essentially pin it in place even more strongly than it was with that single point. So just adding a whole bunch of these just to really kind of pin it down. And then if I click and drag this one here, then you can see that this is pretty much stationary, so nothing's really moving here, and that really allows me to isolate this increase in reds to just this top third of the histogram. If I wanted, I could go even further than that and just add a point up here to restrict it even more in the highlights, so that then just got this very thin band of the histogram that's being affected. But this exact example isn't necessarily how you would perhaps want to use this technique, but really the lesson here is just that you can add multiple points along the curve to kind of lock them in place, to lock them down, while you just adjust a very specific part of the histogram or the tonal range with the curve adjustment. So you can obviously do this in any of the channels, red, green or blue, or RGB. Here I've shown you just an example using the red, but feel free to have a play around and see what happens, really. I mean, experimentation is the name of the game with this, but if you start off from the point of knowing that you can lock very sort of big sections of the histogram in place with all these multiple points on the curve, and then just adjust this one little range here with the 1 point, then that should hopefully be a good starting point for you to kind of make some really accurate edits in your landscapes. So like I said, just a really quick video today with a few interesting things that you can do with the curves adjustment. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know which your favorite tip was in the comments below the video. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll speak to you soon.